Fare hikes ahead for public transport. Bus and train fares for adults will climb by 10 cents per journey starting from 28th of December. Now, to help cushion the hike, Singapore will fork out an additional $250 million to shield commuters. Fares have risen for a third consecutive year. Concession card fares for groups such as students and senior citizens will see a smaller increase of 4 cents per journey. Charlotte Lim with more.
Brace for it. Each train or bus ride you take is soon going to cost more, with public transport fares set to climb 6% by year end. At its annual fare review exercise, the Public Transport Council says the adjustment was driven by growth in core inflation and wages, but was moderated partially by a drop in energy prices from their peak in 2022.
Now, in the face of global economic uncertainties and higher costs of living, the Public Transport Council has kept its focus on balancing our twin mandate of ensuring that fares are affordable for all commuters while also maintaining financial sustainability of our public transport system. And we do this by ensuring that fares keep pace with cost changes, but at the same time, affordable for our commuters.
Keeping fares affordable will also see more support for graduating students. Thousands are expected to benefit from a 4-month extension of their concessionary fares upon the end of their course of study. And to keep a lid on costs for those who need more support, concessionary fares will rise by 4 cents for each journey. And this includes seniors, students, people with disabilities and low-wage workers. That makes up about 2 million commuters, around half of all Singaporeans. In a Facebook post, Transport Minister Chee Hong Tat says the hike is essential to keep the public transport system financially sustainable. That said, cushioning commuters from the full brunt of fare increases remains a key priority. The maximum allowable fare adjustment quantum for this year was 18.9%. That's how high the fare hike could have been if not for the government injecting an additional $250 million. It's also on top of an annual $2 billion worth of subsidies to fund bus and train services.
If you say in one way it is government subsidies, that means it's from taxpayers' money, all right? And I wouldn't dare say, wow, it will go down to zero because, as long as you got to balance it, there will always be that subsidy that may be needed. From a long-term sustainability, again, that is from a long-term perspective, we'll have to balance that out and hopefully that will come down, over time.
Meantime, monthly pass prices will remain unchanged to help heavy users of public transport cap their expenses. And to help those with lower incomes, transport vouchers worth $60 each will be distributed, with the qualifying income ceiling raised to $1,800, up from $1,600. This move is set to benefit an additional 60,000 households.
And for more on the fare increase, we're now joined by transport economist, Associate Professor Walter Tissera from the Singapore University of Social Sciences. Professor Tissera, thank you so much for joining us. First, let's get your thoughts on the fare review, which is raising adult fares by 10 cents and concessionary fares by 4 cents per journey.
Good evening. Well, first, I think the context is important. The reason for the fare hikes is over the last couple of years, we've had a massive surge in energy prices during the recovery from COVID-19. And then in the last 2 years, especially pretty high global inflation. And all of these have been entering the fare formula over the last few years. But instead of implementing all of these increases immediately, what PTC has been doing is they've been deferring quite a large chunk of the increase since 2022 and using additional government subsidy to do so. But basically, you can't continue to do this indefinitely. And I think the reason for this is that public transport subsidies are today quite a significant chunk of the government budget, about 2%, about more than $2 billion a year. And that means that our public transport sustainability is at risk of the government of the day having enough money or not, right, in the budget. So this year, we're going to see some of this deferred increase enter the fares, and that will probably continue for the next few years as well.
But Prof, rising cost of living, that remains a concern for Singaporeans. And this is the third consecutive year of fare hikes, which will take effect on the 28th of December. Now, in terms of timing, could the increase have been delayed?
Yes, you can always delay an increase of this type, but not without consequences. And the reason is, regardless whether the fares actually go up, the cost of operating public transport and enhancing quality has gone up. And it's very hard to trim costs because what you have to do is you have to cut services. We've tried to do that. Commuters have been very negative on service cuts. In fact, commuters have told us that they want better quality services, and the government is responding. Outside of this fair exercise, government has announced $900 million over the next few years for bus service enhancement. So, you can delay the fare hikes, but actually somebody has to pay, and that's the taxpayer. And this is money that could be going to our hospitals, our schools, supporting low-income Singaporeans. And today, I would say we're lucky. We have the fiscal room to subsidize public transport and also pay for all the other things that are important. But I think we want to be careful about whether we should assume we can do that indefinitely.
Do you expect, though, any adverse reaction to these fare hikes from any group of commuters?
Well, of course, if you are an adult, non-monthly travel pass user, you are paying 10 cents more a ride. It's about 5 to 10% more depending on the ride. So that is significant. Now, if you are a lower income consumer, your commuter, you're actually shielded from this. You get workfare concession card subsidies, public transport vouchers. There's also a cap if you're a very heavy monthly user. The fares for the concession cards, the monthly cards and so on haven't gone up. But you will have a sandwich group who don't qualify for the subsidies and who don't use the system enough to actually be fare capped if they buy the travel pass. So, at the end of the day, it's still a few dollars more a month. It's not going to be breaking the bank for middle income commuters, but of course they will be bearing, I think, the brunt of this.
And again, the government is forking out a large quantum of subsidies. We are looking at $250 million, and that's on top of the annual $2 billion of subsidies to shield commuters from the brunt of public transport fare increases. What do you think of this approach? Is it sustainable?
Well, I think the approach of subsidizing public transport heavily, it works well until it doesn't. And, let me explain that. If you look globally, you'll find that public transport systems in many countries, they go through financial crises now and then. And the core reason for the financial crisis is they want to keep fares low and stable, which is great. But to do so, they depend on government subsidies. And when their governments run into financial difficulty, they have to cut the subsidies. And that is when you see double-digit increases in fares, or you see very severe service quality cuts. So I think Singapore, we take a bit of a different approach. We take this graduated approach where every year there is a regular process of fare adjustment. And in the last couple of years, those cost increases have been shared between the commuters and the taxpayers. Now, that means that unfortunately every year there's a bit of a fare adjustment, but this could be more stable than having sudden shocks now and then.
I think you talked a little bit about this earlier. There is this consistent attempt to look out for the vulnerable and also the heavy users of public transport, such as students. Is this year's fare increase of about 4 cents per journey for this group in particular something that they can easily manage?
So one of the important things that's been done this year and continuing over from last year as well has been to try to keep the monthly concession and travel pass charges fixed and stable. And what that means is that the heaviest users, and especially if they fall into vulnerable groups like workfare concession card holders or our students, they are actually not impacted by the fare hike at all if they are heavy enough user to buy the monthly concession passes. Now, if they are paying per ride, yes, their fares are going up by a bit, but not as much as for the adult commuters. And I think many of those affected lower income commuters can also take advantage of the enhanced PTC vouchers as well, public transport vouchers as well. So I think that's the extent that we've tried to distribute more of the fare hike away from lower income and vulnerable commuters.
And we are trying to discourage the use of private transport in Singapore, haven't we? But can this 10-cent hike per journey, can that put a dent in that particular ambition?
Well, I would say these fare hikes over the last couple of years, they've actually had no practical impact, I think, on the decision to go between private transport and public transport. To put it in perspective, the adult monthly travel pass is $128. And so what is that? Over the course of a month, it's maybe something like half a dozen taxi rides. Even if you look at the increase that you would be paying this year if you are an adult commuter, it wouldn't come to more than a few taxi rides over the entire year. That is your increase amount. So that would not make a big difference, I think, in your decision to use private transport versus public. In fact, the most important thing to drive public transport use is to make sure that the public transport system is reliable, it's efficient, it's fast and high quality. And actually, we need to put more money into investing in the public transport system to do that. The fare difference isn't going to make a big deal, I think, for people in terms of choosing private or public transport.
Prof, thank you very much for speaking with us tonight. That was Associate Professor Walter Teixeira from SUSS.